So, Robert, good to see you again. Today we were talking about knowledge and information and spiritual knowledge and putting two together over and over again to make sure that it means four. Um, the suttas tend to, for the beginner, looks really, really massive with all of these bookshelf full of suttas and all of these different books that have hundreds of suttas in them. Uh, and that we also see lists of things. There's four of this and four of that, and four more of them things over there, and five of this and four of that, and then another five of this, and then six of that, and eight of this, and nine of that, and 12 of this, and 16 of those things. On and on it goes, which fits in very well with those of us who have been in school that have been in the thirst for knowledge, that we felt good when we got 9 out of 10. So I'm going to feel better if I get all 10 out of 10. And now I got to feel like that on every test. That one of the things that was quite a surprise for me that stuck with me, even though when I learned it, I had no understanding of the value. And that is that there was a history exam that I took, and that the teacher gave me an A plus minus. Very unusual score, A plus minus. And the note was, answer the questions. Don't tell me everything you know. I think you froze it. No, you got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Just answer the question. Don't tell me everything you know, was his remark.
That's wise. That's very wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so this is the way that we can approach the Dhamma, is just enough to answer the question. We don't have to explain it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we recognize it like that, we begin to understand, hey, really, the Dhamma of the Buddha is actually quite simple. There's not really much to it. But it is subtle enough that it often has to be described in conceptual ideas dozens of ways before the student finally figures out this little simple thing that we're telling them to keep looking at.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and and that's also part of the problem is that all of these various sutras and all of these various books may all be pointing at exactly the right thing, and it's the same thing, but the more books we read, the more confused we get. When they're all, in
Yeah.
fact, trying to teach the same thing.
That's definitely been my experience.
Uh-huh.
Definitely.
And so when we begin to see that really there's nothing to it, then that means that we can enjoy the reading because we keep seeing it over and over again that, yeah, there it is again, been there, done that. Yeah, I see it too. Yes, that's how it's done. And this is the way that we begin to read things, as if we already know what's there. Because in a way, you already do, because you've already seen everything that you need. This is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So talking about it in the sense of enough. How much do you need in order to have a happy life? Just enough, just a little dabble, do you?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
How,
so
how
true.
much
That's so true.
how much air do I need? Just this next breath. That's all I need right now. Later we'll figure it out. But right now all I need is just this breath, just this one thing. And so the Dhamma always comes down to just one thing. But we have to break that thing down in the sense of the practice, because it always has to start with, it doesn't matter if there's just one thing, we have to remember that one thing. And so now we've got two things. One is to remember the right thing, and then two, what the right thing is. And the right thing is to look, to remember to look at what's going on right now, not what's written in a book. That's not what we mean, but to look what's written in the mind, to look at what we're
Yeah.
doing right now. That's what's needed. And when we do that, that brings in a third observation, and that is that, hey, wait a minute, I've got a choice about what I'm doing right now. And I could take that out and put something more wholesome in. And now we're getting around to the most basic part of the practice, which is to remember to look and to change. Remember to look and to change. Remember to look and to change. Remember to look and to gladden the mind, to change. And that's basically all there is to it. And us Westerners say, wait a minute, I've got a PhD in all kinds of crap, and I want all kinds of crap before I'll be satisfied with looking
Yeah,
at.
yeah,
Remember to look and to change. That's just not enough. I want more, I want more, I want more. Well, now we say, okay, here's how we handle that. I want more, I want more. Remember to look at the fact that I want more and I want more, I want more. And then I can change that into I've got enough already. Let me close that book and take a deep breath and relax, because that's really what we're trying to learn how to do, is just to stop. In this case, even stop reading the books.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny you said that. I had like an kind of like awakening experience last week where I I was like I like gladdened my mind to like such a degree where like I felt like the only way to like get more glad was just to like stop even doing anything, which kind of already is like that. But like it was like I kind of had to like give up like my kind of like self-control and like my feeling of doership and like and this was like not like the usual kind of mundane way. This was quite like a I guess like super mundane kind of like metaphysical way of like not being a controller, not having a self. And then after that experience, I came back and I kept trying to do that for like the next 2 days where I kept
Mm-hmm.
trying to like have no control. And I was like, well, if that insight was true then when I was super happy that all I needed to do was not do anything, then it must be true now. And I was just like swimming in all these hindrances. And I was like, oh, well, I just need to be like indifferent to them. I just need to not care. And I was doing so kind of like what you talked about with the Mahasi method, because I was just like not removing them. Because I was like, well, there's no control, there's no doer. And what had gone from like a really like effective technique at the time was now just like just like philosophical like pontificating and just like thinking about stuff, but it was ineffective because what I needed in that moment because was just like to just was to accept that I do have a choice and I do have like control and I can just choose what I do. And so I was like, oh, so now I have a choice. Sometimes you don't have a choice and the choice is to not have a choice. And then sometimes it is to like have a choice and like choose to be happy. And it was like so confusing, but then eventually it kind of gelled in my mind a bit where I kind of got what was going on. I was like, okay, so that was then, this is now. I'm trying to use what worked then now. That's not how it is. This is the present moment. Let's do what works now. And that was just how I kind of
Funny,
sat to you like
funny
straight
thing
up.
about this. Funny thing about this issue of speaking in concepts, because when we're building these concepts, the words actually kind of change meaning. And one of the ways that we can look at that is that word control. That when we are uptight and trying to control things, basically what that means is we're trying to control the situation or control other people. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're not actually in control of our own mind. And so, by becoming in control of your own mind, that means that you stop hating what's going on out there. And so, we stop trying to control the world, because now we're controlling the mind instead. We're controlling the breathing, controlling the mind. And by controlling the breathing and controlling the mind into a wholesome state, then that controls also the feelings. And so now we feel good. We've got the body energized and we got the mind fit for work. And that's then when the mind is fit for work, that's because we've already finished the real work. And the real work is to get the mind into that state. If we're not in that state, now we have other work to do. And what is that? To control the situation. But once we learn to control our mind, there's nothing left to do.
That's that I know exactly what you mean about the sila, the morality coming like as like a next step because it's like when you're like completely happy and satisfied, like you never want to do mean things. Like you never are mean when you're really in a good mood. And like it's so true. It's like I don't need to like worry about like is is what I'm like doing with my life like is it like a really compassionate life? It's like no, just like become happy and that's just what you want to do. Like it's like it's like you gotta like start where you're at,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
what we can start at then is to remember to look. And if we look and find that meanness, now we have a choice over it. If we don't see that we're being mean in our thoughts about other people, then we're likely to open our mouth and be mean actually out loud to them. But when we are awake to the fact that we feel mean towards someone because he did this or he did that or he said this or he said that, and now I have mean thoughts about him, I could then recognize that, hey, who's hurting here? Is it him because I have mean thoughts, or are these mean thoughts themselves painful? Yeah, the one who suffers is the one who's being mean.
yeah, that's it, man. That's it. Yeah, yeah,
And so we need to wake up to our own meanness, or to wake up to our own stubbornness, or to wake up on our demand that I've got to get my word in, or I've got to say my piece, or I've got to tell that teacher how bad I feel when the teacher's not about to let you say that. And so this is what we need to wake up to, is to wake up to this meanness, this demand that we've got to get our way. But in fact, we talked last time about anger, because anger is nothing but the expression of that. We feel powerful when we're angry. We get
that's
adamant, we get
true.
stubborn,
That's true.
right?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and you feel like whole inside. Like I always found like when I have like two sides of me fighting, that's like this division is really uncomfortable. But when I'm angry, it's like I'm all of me is angry. Like I feel whole and complete, and so it's kind of like satisfying in a way. Like I feel like.
Yes, there is satisfaction in anger, because the reality is that anger itself is a protective mechanism that is shielding us from danger. The underlyingness under fear, excuse me, under anger, is fear. That when we get angry, it's because we're feared that we're not going to get what we want, or that we've lost something, or that something terrible is either has happened or is about to happen. And that's the fear of loss. And the anger then is to protect us from that sense of fear of loss. It's a protective mechanism. And in olden days, that fear would have been real, because that fear would have been coming from an actual predator. And so we keep that mentality built into our genes as part of the instinctual process, that we see things that we don't know and understand, we see them as a predator. And so
Mm,
we go around protecting ourselves from things that are in reality not dangerous at all.
yeah, yeah.
So the boss is angry. So what? That's not dangerous. But for most people, when the boss is angry, they feel desperate. They feel in grave danger.
It's kind of been like trippy for me because like a lot of my a lot of what I felt like in danger of was like in danger of having like a bad life. So it was kind of like counterintuitive because like I felt like I needed to like attain like enlightenment and stuff to like I need to reach like the goal, right? So that I can have like this great life. But like even that's like even that wanting was like it was more like kind of like desire and stuff and it was leading
That's
to all these other things
exactly.
like all the negative emotions. I really wanted this, so sometimes I'd be like angry that I don't have it, or I'd be like upset, or and then it would like project into all these other things like this need to know and to understand. Like I need to read all these books, I need to talk to like every teacher who exists so I can get all their wisdom. And it's like
Funny
um
how, though, when we are angry and upset, we're not in that moment having a good life. The very life that you wanted, you can't give yourself right then,
yeah, yeah.
unless you can wake up to that.
And
And
that's
you
like
wake up to see that the very good life that you want, you're depriving yourself of that right now. Wow, that's almost mind
Yeah.
blowing. The very
Yeah.
life that we want, the very enlightenment that we want, we are not experiencing that right now because we want something.
Yeah, because we want the life. It's like it's just like it's just tricky, man. It just like it like you can I can't even like wrap my head around it. Like it's like I want to be happy, and then wanting to be happy is stopping being happy. That's like a really simplistic explanation, but it's like it's so true, and it's just like it's crazy. And this was really interesting. Was like um I had all these like I've had like all these like experiences of like non-duality where like I'll be there and then I'll lose it and I'll be there and I'll lose it. And like I kind of like and then every time I'd have one of those, always it would be followed by like this process of this really painful process of like trying to figure out how I did it and construct a method to get back. So I have a really big one lately was the doubt thing that I was talking to you about with like why is doubt so overpowered? I was like, oh, all the other hindrances must come from doubt. Doubt is the thing. Therefore, if I just have faith that I'm okay and I believe in myself, then that's it. And then after a while, I had another one which was like, oh, the reason I don't have faith is because I don't love myself enough and it's self-hate. And so if I just have lots of metta for like my rejected parts of myself, then I'll like have it. And so it's like always changing. Like the thing that I think is going to be the like the magic key is like it's never the magic key. Like it's always like changing. Like in for that time, that doubt was what I had to do. And then for the next time, it was like my self-hatred. And then, for the next time, it was like,
Well, they run in
um,
circle around each other. They're all just aspects of the same thing that we're in doubt. We're in a hurry to get the answer. There's restlessness. Doubt and restlessness are the same thing. Doubt and ignorance are the same thing. They're confusion. We don't know. And we feel uncomfortable because we feel unsafe because we don't know. Okay. And then we don't like feeling dangerous. And they're so all the hindrances are just all the same thing. And so what you're
that's
doing is you're
that's
chasing around saying which one caused which. Well, they're all causing
yeah.
each other. It's an interrelated ball.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like a big like ball of like yarn, like kind of like and like
Mhm.
sometimes you have to like pull on one yarn to like untangle the whole ball. Sometimes you have to pull on another. It's like whatever ends kind of like sticking out, I feel like. I don't know. Like yeah.
You are actually now describing Gordian's knot. Do you know the story of Gordian's knot?
I am not familiar.
Okay, in the very, very ancient times, there was, and in fact, because no one could untie the Gordian knot, that I don't even know what they called it then. But the idea was is that it was a piece of rope that was so tightly wound together and all tied up that no one could figure out how to untie this rope. And then it became a contest. And then it became a religion. And so now here's
That's
this
crazy.
temple with this rope hanging from it that's all tied up. And you've got all of these scribes and Pharisees and meditators and everybody sitting in the room trying to figure out how to untie this knot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Gordian himself walks in, he sees what's going on, he asks and he gets the understanding, and he then takes the rope down and takes his sword out and he cuts it in half. That's what we
And
have
it
to
like
do
it
with
all just
that
like
vial
falls
of
apart.
strength. Just cut it. Just cut it
Yeah.
out. Just stop.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
I was
answer to the Gordian's knot. Stop trying to untie all of this mess of the Dhamma and just cut right through it. It's simple. It's that simple. We don't have to figure out how to untie it. Have you? In fact, the one that I remember was fishing line, trying to untangle a great big knot of fishing line. Another one that people struggle with, and that is untying last year's Christmas lights that are all in a great big
yeah,
mess.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've struggled with that myself, yeah.
And the right way to do Christmas lights is to keep cutting them where there's sockets. Don't leave two big tangles of mess and leave them at one big tangle of mess. At least get the ends so that you can find out how to pull the ends out. But the ultimate answer is go buy some new Christmas lights and throw the old ones out. We don't need to
Yeah.
untangle that mess.
I thought
And
I
in
thought that
fact,
was what you were gonna say, like about the Gordian knot. I thought it was like the solution to the Gordian knot is just like throw it away. Just
yeah,
like
you
problem
throw it
solve,
out.
goodbye.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is what we
Just like
can do
ignore it.
with
Yeah.
our confusion in the mind instead of trying to figure it all out so that we'll be happy. We could just throw that knot out. and be happy. You don't have to have the answers to our questions to be happy.
Oh yeah, like it's like you have to have like comfort with not knowing. That's one way I've heard it described. And it's like, and this is like so crazy because it's like it's kind of like a solution to doubt is to just like not care that you're doubting, right? You have comfort with not knowing. You're like, I don't know, but that's okay. And then you're like, wait, like you said, like you're above it all. You're just like you're just chilling. It's like, yeah, sure, I don't know what it is, but I don't care. Like I'm above it because I'm okay with that. I don't know. And then I kind of like I heard that, and while you were talking, I kind of like extrapolated that out. So it could be like, well, if you're feeling angry, it's like don't be bothered by the fact that you're angry. Because for me, a lot of the time when I feel angry, I have like this rushing energy, like this is a hindrance. I have to get rid of this. I have to get rid of this. And it's like, but if I just be like patient with myself and be like, okay with I'm angry, like that can kind of like make it a lot easier to just start practicing again, you know? And so like I'm kind of curious if you think like that's kind of a way it could work with like every hindrance, just like you just don't be bothered by it being there. You're like, that's okay, you know, and it's okay that I don't know. It's okay that I'm upset about this, you know. It's kind of like, I don't know.
Right.
I'm kind of curious of your
Well,
thoughts. Like,
if you just had the thought, it's okay that I'm angry, that itself, that okay with anger is not an angry thought. Think that you just made a change there. But if you say, "Oh, damn it, I'm angry," now you're still angry. You can see the
that's
anger, but you're
that's
angry
so
at the
true.
anger. Now you could say, "I'm angry, and that's okay. I can see it now." And by saying that I could see it now, you've already in the process of making it change. That makes it so easy. It's just to see it and recognize that that's what it is. The recognition that it is there is part of the change process itself. That's when the sati is strong. The sati helps that right effort.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of like with meditation, it's like I'm a lot of the times I've it's well, this is actually really obvious, but I'm gonna say it like it's like I'm like reacting to the sati. So it's like I'm reacting to like what I've seen. And like I kind of think of the sati as like having like an insight. So it's like you've seen that you're angry. That's like an insight into the way things are. Like, and you've like identified it as anger. Maybe that's a, like you're noting it or something. But like you don't really need to do that. You can see that you're angry, right? And then it's like you can react to that badly and be like, oh no, I'm angry. I need to figure a way out. Or you can be like, oh, good seeing me. And then you're like and then the sati comes more often. The sati like repeats more often because you're rewarding yourself for it instead of discouraging yourself. And like
Hmm?
and like when you like and I feel like it's kind of this it kind of works like the opposite with like good things. So if it's like I see that this is good, this is like a good thing. If I say, oh yeah, like good job me, nice, like that can kind of like make me attached to it. Like I can be like, oh, good job, me. Like it's me. I saw it. Like I'm so good. And it's like actually like kind of the opposite, where if it's like, oh, like that's cool, that's fine, like whatever, that's cool. You don't really like try to appreciate it. Like it's kind of like the opposite with like happy things, and then that makes it like maybe last longer. Like with like jhanas. Like if I go into a jhana for like I'll get in for a second, and then I'll be like, yeah, I did it, I'm out. But if I like ignore the jhana and I just keep doing anapanasati, it all the like happiness like wells up on its own because I'm kind of like ignoring it. So it's kind of like an opposite. But I
Yes.
just thought that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like in the old days when batteries and automobiles and spark plugs and all of that existed, that we would have to push the car off. And after we got the car rolling, then we had to run to the door, open the door, jump in the driver's seat, put it in gear, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the sequence that it looks like that you're doing, that when you get the jhana going, you got to go jump in the seat to try to control it or something like that. Where in fact, what we need to do is to stay in the back of the car and keep pushing. And don't worry about where the car is going. The fact is that we got it rolling right now. We'll learn to steer it later. So this is what we mean is to come back to the anapanasati. Just keep going with, never mind that thought.
Never mind,
Just
start
keep
again.
right.
That's like the ultimate mantra. That's so good. Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. It's like never mind, start again.
To just keep coming back to that breath, keep coming back to the gladdening of the mind, keep coming back, keep coming back. That's all there is to it. It's a very simple game, a very simple process. And yet, somehow or another, because of high tech or whatever, it seems that the Western mindset means that we've got to find something that's hard to do.
Yeah, like for me, it's like I have to find like the first principle. I have to find like the root of all the suffering, and I have to find like the root like solution. It's like I have to, like whatever. But it's like, and that like trying to like, which on the surface it sounds good. It's like you have a problem, you find a solution that works every time. That's like duh. But like actually like the solution that works quote unquote every time is just like not caring about finding a solution that works every time, and like that actual trying to understand like the Dhamma and reading all the books and trying to like cross-reference like Hinduism and Buddhism and the traditions, because it was like that's like the hindrance, and that's like what we were
Yes,
talking about before, like it's like the trickiness.
scholarship is a hindrance. And there are tons and tons and tons of Buddhist scholars, many of whom are monks, quite a few of them. In fact, the ones who are in the most danger of never getting any value out of the teachings of the Buddha do their Buddhism by getting a PhD in Buddhist studies, which means those guys have no chance.
Yeah.
They've got no opportunity. Why? Because their teachers are just other college professors. That in fact, most of the Buddhist teachers, when someone goes to a famous university like Harvard to get a PhD in Buddhism, the professors that are there to teach have a PhD in probably something else. That was what was going on with computer science when the PhD programs were done in computer science. All of the professors had PhDs in something else because there were no PhDs in computer science. So I had PhDs in nuclear physics, which they knew quite a lot about computers, but they had PhDs in nuclear physics or mathematics or something like that. So that's how it is with Buddhist studies, is that the people who were teaching, they don't know what the teachings of the Buddha are about. They just got PhDs in something or another. And that qualifies.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it sucks as well because those are the ones translating all the suttas.
Right. So those are the scholars, the ones who learn Pali without learning what the Pali is actually trying to say. Better thing to do is to figure out what the Pali is saying and then translate, except by the time you've actually figured out what the Pali is saying, who bothers to translate? That's
Well,
why we're
that's the
almost doomed.
thing. That's the
Yeah, we're
thing.
almost
Like
doomed
with
to have bad translations because the only people doing translations are the ones who don't understand it. That's why they're translating. Once you understand it, why bother to do more translations? We know it.
I,
We understand.
exactly. It's like when you it's like that quote from Alan Watts, like when you get the message, hang up the phone. It's like you know what to do. Just like do anapanasati, just relax. If you need a mantra, just say like this is fine. That's one I use a lot. I just it's like just don't worry about it. Like ignore the problem and it goes away. And it's like, and then like I I don't even know, man. I confuse myself just trying to think about it and describe it. It's like
Yeah,
I
so
I
never
I,
mind. We
I
don't even
find
have
some
to
way to get
describe it.
to
We
turn
can
it
just
into a
not
like
even
complex
describe
science.
it. We can just enjoy it. We don't have to even describe it.
That's it, man. We don't even need to like note it. We can just chill. Like, yeah, describe it,
Just
like note it, like whatever.
just
Just like
go just go right to the right effort of throwing that stuff out and just chill. Everything's okay. Wow, what a simple teaching, and yet it's so difficult for us to figure out how simple the teaching really is.
well said. Well said. That's a really good pointer. It's like, yeah.
Never mind, start again. Never mind all of that crap. We don't have
I
to
had like
describe it. We don't have to understand it. We don't have to hate it. We don't have to love it. Just throw it out. That's
yeah.
what garbage is. We do not have to be garbage collectors or garbage collectors is the right word, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And
garbage,
that's what
like
we are. We
garbage
collect
scientists.
garbage. We're garbage collectors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I had
I
like a
mean, look
thought
at
just
your
now.
back wall. Your back wall is just absolutely covered with beautiful garbage. It's just, you're a garbage collector.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, pretty much.
So
Yeah,
recognize that we do that with the mind too, that you collected that stuff for your wall because you were collecting that stuff for your mind.
I had like a kind of non-dual thought just now, which is like the problem is like you're trying to simplify something that's so simple you can't like simplify it. It's like you're trying to simplify
It's
something for one
simplify
thing,
enough,
but
right? It's right.
it's
It's
not. It's already
simplified
like
enough.
kind of just like nothing. Like you said, there's like
There's
nothing
nothing
much
to
to
it.
it. It's like just by simplifying it, you're already making it into something. Like,
Hmm.
and
By
like
cutting it.
everyone knows how to do it, like innately. Like we know the difference between happiness and sadness. Like every human being knows that. You'd have to be like, you'd have to have like a disorder where you can't feel pain not to, like one of
Or
these
it would
really
be a language
rare
confusion.
cases.
But
Yeah,
beyond language confusion, even the people in the mental wards, they still know the difference between happiness and unhappiness.
yeah.
I know because I worked in those wards.
Do you think this is kind of interesting, but do you think like the method is arbitrary in a way? So like if you use anapanasati or if you use like Kriya yoga, which is Kriya pranayama, it's just like it's deep breaths, but you like visualize chakras and stuff. It's slightly different. It's like a Hindu kind of method, or
Ah,
like self-inquiry.
precisely so.
It's
That is
okay.
why there are so many different spiritual practices all over the world. From the whirling dervishes to the sitting meditators to the rishis to the priests to all kinds of folks have all kinds of practices and methods, and sometimes they work, but mostly they don't. And the reason for that is because the methods that were designed uh, by people who knew that what they were really trying to do with this technique was to get the guy out of his old unwholesome thoughts about it and to get him into wholesome thoughts. This is what prayer is all about. Prayer and supplication. Oh, wow, things are so great. We got such a good God here. God's taking care of everything. Why don't people then realize that and just chill? No, they say, oh, God's our good God, is a great God, and we got to go to battle and beat all them other people into making them believe what we believe, because actually I don't believe my good God is all that good anyway. We got to make him better by getting him a bigger crowd.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. That's good. Oh man, good seeing Dhammarato. Nice. Wow.
So wholesome thoughts can come from anywhere, but the human mind is always wanting more and more and more. So the technique is not really important. What's important then is back to the Eightfold Noble Path, those specific things, is to remember to look at what you're doing. It doesn't matter how many spiritual practices there are in the world. The problem with every one of them is that at the wrong time, or at just the time when somebody needs that spiritual practice, he's forgotten to do it and is getting angry and frustrated and uptight instead of following his spiritual practice of, oh, my God's a good God and everything is going to be okay and there's no worries. If he'd think about it like that, if he'd remember to think about it like that, then he would be chilled.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
I
matter the
like
spiritual practice. If the question is, can you remember to do that spiritual practice?
and like another thing I've like kind of seen is like not even with just like people like debating like which practice is like the most effective one, because that's like everyone's debate when they
The one
start
you
like
remember to do is
spirituality.
the effective
Yeah.
one. The one.
It's like which enlightenment or like which altered state of consciousness basically is like the best one, like people will be like, if it's not like this jhana, it's not like good, but like if you're like happy and satisfied, like you're kind of Gucci, like it doesn't really matter, like the if it's the first jhana or if it's the eighth jhana or what like your
There's eight.
philosophical
What book is
insights that
that
it gave
in?
you. A couple of them. It's I mean, I'm sure you're familiar.
I got one sutta where you can number them up to 9. But in the sutta, they stop at 4, but then they give 5 aspects of the fourth jhana. That's where all those other numbers come from, is what do you do
Huh.
when your mind is fit for work?
Okay, here's an interesting question. Would you say like the 3 ones after the first one are also aspects of the first one?
It depends. Once you got the mind fit for work, the other jhanas are merely what you're working on. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I feel
That's
like
the important point is that when we are developing the first jhana, and while we're in the first jhana, we pay attention to applying the mind to the wholesome and sustaining the wholesome. Once we get that rolling so that all the mind's thoughts are wholesome, one wholesome thought after another, after another, after another, we can begin to put some gaps in those discursive, wholesome thoughts into another kind of thought. And that thought is feeling good. When you feel really, really good, in that instant, you're in the second jhana. And
yeah,
that happens at
you're not
Christmas,
thinking, you're
it happens
feeling.
on birthdays, it happens on paycheck days, it happens all the time when people can see that paycheck, feel good, sigh, relax.
That actually clarifies a lot for me. It's like the first jhana is like you're enjoying pleasure with the mind, and then the second one's like you're just enjoying it with the heart, kind of like I think of it like maybe I don't know.
Okay,
That's kind of
right. But it is also overwhelmingly exhilarating. How good can you feel this second jhana? So good you don't have to talk yourself into feeling good anymore. You just feel good. And that's how you're spending this one moment and the next one moment and the next one moment of wow, how nice this stuff is.
Do you remember that story I said at the beginning about how like I had like my like awakening experience and then I didn't have to do anything to like make the like happiness and the non-dualness like continue? I feel like that might have been actually kind of like first jhana like to second jhana because like I didn't have to do anything, but then I kept applying the technique that worked in like the transition
To
from
keep
first to
it
second
going,
jhana
right?
to keep it going
Right.
when wasn't even in jhana. Like I was just feeling like all the garbage. Yeah.
Well, you see, this whole
Yeah.
issue of the jhanas are overrated. Buddhism would be Buddhism and would work beautifully without any name of jhana. We don't need it. The Buddha, in fact, had the jhanas before he even was doing the austerity. So he did jhanas early in his practice, first 2 or 3 years of his after he was 29. So jhanas are really, really highly overrated. Now we can also say that when the mind is fit for work, jhanas are also natural occurrences, depending upon what you're paying attention to, what you're looking at. If you're looking at how good you feel, that's definition of second jhana. When you're looking at how nice things are, even though you feel really, really great, you're still just, then that's the third jhana. And then when you melt into just a puddle of nothing, then that's the fourth jhana. But now you can pay really close attention to what's in that puddle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Okay, so that's all these jhanas are. They're just what are you looking at? Are you looking at the mind? That's first jhana. If you're not looking at the mind, you're just out there behaving like a human, then that's not jhana. That's ordinary behavior. First jhana is actually looking, paying attention to, and controlling your thoughts, your mind, and your feelings. But then as we gain skill at controlling the mind, we start paying more attention to controlling the feelings. How good can I feel? I don't have to talk to myself about how good I feel. And in fact, talking to myself about how good I feel is not as good as actually just feeling that good. So it's really hard to talk about how good can you feel. So those are the jhanas. Is what it depends upon what we're thinking about or what we're paying attention to. So paying attention to how you feel, and then you begin to pay attention to how the mind itself works. And that's the fourth jhana, paying attention to how the mind works. In fact, the fourth jhana is when the mind is in a state that we can actually see some of the Paticca Samuppada in operation, especially in reserve to the five aggregates. That you can think about it like this, that the first half of the Paticca Samuppada has one function, and the second half has another function. Okay, the second half of Paticca Samuppada, which is Vedana, Tanha, Upadana, Bhava, Jati, Dukkha, that sequence is for the mind in ignorance. That sequence doesn't happen when the mind is fit for work. It stops at feelings. So now you have the range of from ignorance to feelings to work with. And when the mind is fit for work, we start looking at how do these images, how does this thought system affect our feelings? Because the Buddha's already told us that it does. That's why we were changing from unwholesome to wholesome. So now we begin to see how my thoughts affect how I feel. If I can see how my thoughts affect how I feel, guess what? I can control my feelings by controlling my thoughts. Backing up one more step, we begin to see what is perception. How do we think the way that we do is because of our past. If we stop pulling stuff out of the past and stay in this present moment, then our perception is much more cleaner, and our observations, our internal representation of reality is very close to reality. So this is how we can actually see that when the mind is in fourth jhana, or in fact, when you're looking at that stuff within your mind, you are in fourth jhana, even if it's for a short period of time. The question is if you can develop sustaining the mind in a wholesome place at first jhana, then you can learn then to sustain looking at perception so that you come down to the point that you're just in consciousness, just in sensory awareness. And that's really gaga feeling. That's in fact paying attention to that in the first place. This is what second jhana was all about. So these things are really interrelated, but the real issue is can you stay and sustain the mind in a wholesome state? If you could do that, these jhanas are going to happen on their own. And you don't have to say that one's better than the other. So after all of that, where were we? We were talking about the jhanas and whatnot.
I can't remember exactly where we were. Oh yeah, I was gonna talk about the 10 fetters, but before we do that, I'm just like kind of curious, like how did you figure all this like out, man? Like did Buddhadāsa just tell this all to you, or like, because like I've read like tons of books and they all give like different advices and like talk about different things that just they don't like hit home the same way like your teaching. Like your teaching is very like, for me it's like really the way you teach the Buddha's method. It's like it makes sense, like, but like other teachers like stuff just doesn't really make sense. So like, is it just how you explain it, or like is this what you learn in like every monastery? Like,
Well, the answer to that question is no. But I did have two good teachers, and in fact, more than one. I've learned from a lot of people, but I would say that it was Bhikkhu Buddhadāsa and his influence on others like Achan Po that actually allowed me to be in an environment to where I was basically not allowed to be unnoble.
I see. That is interesting. That is very interesting. That's
That
very, very
everyone
interesting.
around was completely noble. And when I would bring up my dead rabbit or something out of the past, they just laugh at me, you know. It's like,
Oh
why
my
are you
God.
making
Now I see where you get like your dark humor from. Yeah. Yeah,
where
that's
you
cool,
see
man. That's
what?
cool. I see where you get your dark sense of humor from.
I didn't know it was dark.
I don't know, it seemed kind of dark, like to me. Like I was a bit surprised, like with like the, you remember like the puppy gif, and you were like with like the mother's hands around the neck, and I was like what's he talking about? Like,
Oh, I see what you're talking about. No, the idea is to give big, clear examples so that the student really understands what we're talking about, because the concept that we use is outlandish and overboard. Okay. An example would be teaching Paticca Samuppada and talking about contact is like that we've seen a tree and we crawl up into the tree, and that tree then is our understanding of stuff. And the way that that tree impacts us is when we fall out of it and we crash land. That's pasa. That's contact. When we fall out, bang. Okay, so that's an example. Okay, so it's a strong way of looking at it. A lot of people think of pasa or contact as kind of rubbing by or scraping by or touching like on a crowded street. But no, it's much more like touching something on a crowded high-speed freeway where every um, bumper nick is a big deal. We got to stop and talk about it and look at the damage. So that's what we've got to do. We can't just brush by with this dukkha. We got to stop and pay attention to the damage that just happened. Swap some names and look at what's going on. So that's why we use examples that are very big and very clear, is to give the students the understanding that things are very clear if you see them directly. But it's very hard because we often get some desire, we get some value out of the hindrance. The hindrances were there because we ignorantly thought that they had some value or gratification. So
Yeah,
the
like
Buddha
with the
talks
anger
about,
thing, it's so obvious, right? You feels good, kind of good, like in a weird way. It's like, yeah, like we think it's like a good thing. We think it's good to like be afraid of not knowing because that will help us know. We don't realize like that ignorance is like that it doesn't matter that we don't know.
And so if we can recognize that the damage that we do with these hindrances, then we can throw them out. One of the teachings of the Buddha, this is actually in several suttas, longer suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, but in the even in the Anguttara and the Majjhima, the Samyutta Nikaya, is the story of this another kind of triple gem, and that is that we get gratification. We get gratification from what we do. One of the gratifications of doing this same repetitive habit is that I don't have to look at what I'm doing. I don't have to take the effort. I can just do it automatically. That we are often on automatic pilot because we trust that we can get away with being on automatic pilot. And there we run our little birdie into the side of a tree. Because we think that the automatic pilot, the bird doesn't have to watch where he's going. And so this is one of the gratifications that we get, is life is easy and I can just cruise and get away with it. The fact is that we can't get away with it. We keep running into things if we're not looking at where we're going. And what are we most likely are running into is the hindrances in our mind. And so then we begin to say, this may not be as gratifying as I thought that it was, because I'm actually into Buddhism and into meditation and all that, because I've already begun to see enough dukkha to recognize that there's dukkha everywhere. Okay, and so this is the idea. Then we got to really look at what we're doing.
And that's like the energy. That's like the energy part, right? That's like you have to have the energy to like pay attention. You can't just like feel good and then stop paying attention, because then like an hour later, like you're back in the hindrances and you're like, oh, now I have to start all again from the beginning again to like gladden my mind. Like,
right. The secret to high-speed motorcycle racing is that you keep paying attention and keep paying attention, and you keep looking down the road as far as you can see. Otherwise, you're going to crash.
Yes.
You're going to crash if you don't watch where you're going when you're running. And here we are running and racing around our high-speed lives, crashing left, right, and center because we're not paying attention to where we're going, what we're doing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's easy to stop paying attention. It's easy. We take great gratification as, oh, well, so far so good. I don't have to watch. I can get away with not watching where I'm going. And then
That was me last week, man. Like I had like this like big like awakening opening thing, and I was like, oh, this must be like stream entry, because it was like the biggest one that I've had. But anyway, I don't it wasn't stream entry, but like I thought it was, and so
it
I
was
was just
just
like
an
being lazy.
experience.
And
An
I was like, oh,
experience is
I don't have to do work anymore. And then next thing you know, like 3 days later, all this dukkha's back. I'm like, oh no, I lost it, and like getting all butthurt, like because like I had made like this spiritual ego out of like this attainment, when
Mhm.
really it's just an experience. Like, yeah,
Exactly. So this is
oh
the
my
whole
God.
quality. We have to keep watching what we're doing, because the danger is if we're not watching what we're doing, we're going to screw up again. That things are too complicated to just let things go on automatic pilot. That's why they don't use, not until Tesla does it, but takeoff and landings require a great deal of attention that they can't be done with automatic pilot. So every time that we take off and every time we land, we have to do that very consciously. Cruising
Mm,
is okay to let
mm.
cruising happen on automatic pilot, but as soon as something happens, we got to pay attention. Otherwise, we're
Yeah,
going to crash.
yeah,
So this
yeah.
is now the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path, going in this point that we get a great deal of gratification by going on to automatic pilot and letting things cruise because it's easy. The problem
Mm,
with it is that we don't see the dangers in that. Here's an example. Homer Simpson loves donuts. Oh, does he love donuts? Anytime that there's donuts in the break room, he goes and eats all the donuts. He goes to the
mm.
pastry shop and he buys donuts. And then he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, you've got diabetes, you've got high blood pressure, you've got chronic obesity. If you don't stop eating those donuts, they're going to kill you. Now, the
Mm.
question is Homer Simpson going to listen to the doctor or not? If he listens to the doctor, now he understands the doctor is saying danger in donuts. You might have had a great deal of gratification by eating donuts, but donuts are dangerous for you now. And so he begins to plot his escape. One of the escapes is don't go to the donut shop, don't go to the break room, don't go shopping and buy donuts and bring them home, because if we bring them home, now we don't have the willpower to resist them. Okay. And
Yeah,
so if
yeah.
donuts are dangerous, we can stop the donuts. This is the whole practice. And when we recognize these mental hindrances are actually just donuts that we love to eat and making us sick. I mean, little kids are that way all the time. They talk about getting hypertense. Why? The teacher, on a good day, will have a birthday party or something, and there's cake all over the place, and every kid is on a sugar high, and they're just jumping all over the place,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so that's what sugar highs do to us. They're dangerous. And yet we got a great deal of satisfaction out of eating all of that candy or all of that
Yeah,
cake.
yeah.
So now that we recognize that the cake has dangers built into it, we can start to either moderate it or eliminate it. And this is the way that we're going to be doing with our mind, is that we either moderate it or eliminate it. Now, what happens is when people say, all right, I'm going to eliminate it, and then it comes back, then they get frustrated again. That's a very common thing. Almost all of the good students worry because they thought if they threw that hindrance out, booted him out hard enough and give him a great big butt job, just kick the hell out of him, he won't come
Yeah.
back. And
Yeah,
here it
like if they
comes
kick him
right
far
back
enough
again.
out. But of
Yeah,
course,
that's
yeah. It's like a
right. So I'm
boomerang.
going to kick him even harder next time.
Yeah.
No, no, all you have to do is just nudge him out, but he's going to come back. Just nudge him out again.
Yeah,
We
like you just
also
like
have
keep
the
nudging him,
idea that
just like
we're going to uproot that hindrance. No, what we
Mm.
can only do is to nudge him out when it comes. An example of that is a weed that's growing out of the crack in the pavement that belongs to the city, a sidewalk or something. You can't go tear up the city's sidewalks. That's a lot of work, even if you did, just to get rid of that little weed that's coming. Much better is when the weed does come up, just whack it off at the surface. That's all you have to do is
Hmm.
just whack off. You keep whacking that leaf off every time it comes up, the root's going to wither and die. The same thing is true with the mind. These hindrances, if you give them any gratification at all, that's feeding them. And if you give them no gratification at all and say, hey, I don't need that, that's dukkha, out it goes, then
Yeah.
that will eventually wither and die.
And
So
you're
you
not
don't
making a,
have to uproot it. All you have to do is just throw it out right now.
and I kind of feel like when you trying to like uproot it, you're making a really big deal out of it. Like it's like
Hmm?
I gotta end suffering forever. It's like you're turning suffering from this tiny little thing that was bothering you now into this lifelong issue. It's like your lifelong spiritual quest, and you it's just like blowing it up out of proportion.
Uh-huh.
And now you're
And look
seeing
how
suffering like
many
everywhere you
books
look. It's
you've
like,
read. And look how
yeah,
many books you've
right.
read because it was a great big deal. Now that we recognize that there's nothing to it, you don't have to do a lot of reading. The thing that we need to read is, do I see that thing coming up? And if I do, out it comes.
Out it goes. Yeah.
And that makes the practice very easy because you only have to remove this hindrance.
So
Just this.
So is the the fetters, can we think of the 10 fetters as just an expanded version of the five hindrances? So they just add five more. Like, is that how you
Well,
think about them, or like,
yeah, there they are. They're listed that way. The hindrance of doubt is in fact the fetter of ignorance. The fetter of wanting something, of lust in this moment, is exactly the same thing as the underlying greed and ill will, which is the fourth and the fifth fetter. Yeah, they're the same thing. They're just different
mm,
ways of talking about them.
mm, yes,
So if you
yes, yes.
remember, if
Oh,
you
I,
eliminate
yeah.
this hindrance, you're breaking its root
I think
slowly,
kind of
slowly.
what I do like in my mind a lot is like I reify like the lists. So I'll say the five hindrances, I'll be like, anytime I have a negative thought, I'm like, oh, which hindrance is this? Like, not that it matters because I know how to like get out of it. Like I don't need to know which hindrance it is, but I'll like, which hindrance is it or which fetter is it?
Which
Like I'll kind of
hindrance it
make a
is,
big deal out of
labeling
it.
it like that is very Mahasi.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
much the Mahasi method. And all we really need to know is this is a hindrance from me feeling as good as I would feel if I would stop doing that,
Mm,
recognizing
mm,
that the hindrances are like that. Here's one more thing that I'll tell you about, and that is that in Sutra number 39, there are five metaphors or five similes for the hindrances. And guess what? These five similes do not correspond one on one with the hindrances, but they do give an indication to how interrelated the hindrances are. So the first story is the story of being sick in the hospital. And you feel bad. You felt bad. You went to the hospital, but when you get out of the hospital, you want out. You're really happy to get out of the hospital. You feel freedom. No one wants to stay in the hospital even when they're sick. But when you don't feel so sick, and in fact, the story is that the doctor comes by and he checks you out and says, "Yeah, it's okay for you to go home. Let's do all the paperwork, and we'll come back." And now you're sitting there on your hospital bed, got your clothes on, waiting to leave the hospital, and you can't because they haven't done the paperwork yet. They haven't gotten your bill
mm,
yet, and you can't
mm.
leave yet, and you really want to get out of this hospital.
Yeah.
All right. And so
Yeah.
when you do get out of the hospital, oh, what a relief I am out of this hospital. Okay. So that's the first example that when we are sick, we're sick. When we get well, we feel a whole lot better. The second analogy is the analogy of being in prison. When we are in prison, we want out. We know when the due date is. We know that we've either got a life sentence and we're never getting out, or we got 5 years, or we got 2 years, or whatever like that. And we're planning on getting out. The number one thing for all prisoners is getting out of prison.
Exactly.
Then, when you get out of prison, oh, what a relief it is to be out of prison. So these analogies are beginning to point out that the reason that we want to be free from the hindrances is what a relief it is to have them out of the mind. So the next one is the servant of the king. This guy has to get up in the morning before the king gets up so that he could dress the king and get the king fed. And now he's got to follow the king around all day long, taking care of the king. And then at the end of the day, he has to put the king to bed first before he can go to bed. And this is his day, day in, day out. Well, guess what? We have that kind of life ourselves. Who are you, or what are you a servant to? Your desires. They're the king, and you got to go around fulfilling all of those desires. You're the servant of your own desires. And when you allow those desires to go to sleep, now you can rest.
Wow, that's a really good one. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm kind of like just like a slave to my every impulse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not every impulse, because I'm more of a slave to like the desires, like wanting to be wealthy and stuff, because that's like trying to make money every day. It's like that's a socially sanctioned impulse, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fourth one is being in debt. You've got a mortgage. Every month you got to pay the mortgage, or you're on into the loan shark and you keep having to hide from the loan shark because every time the loan shark sees you, he wants money. All right. And then imagine that you are out of debt. Either the loan shark himself died, or maybe you moved to another country, or that you paid the debt. And to now you're debt free. You don't owe anybody anything. What a relief it is that, in fact, when people pay off their mortgage, they have a celebration. Wow, what a relief it is to have that debt paid. And now I don't owe anybody anything. That, in fact, if you owe anything, if you've got credit cards or any of that kind of stuff, it's a burden. And we
Yeah.
have to do it. So we are actually indebted to our desires. We have to go pay whatever our desires say that we want.
Oh my God. That's a crazy way to think about it. Because I feel like now that you said it and phrased it like that, I'm thinking of it like less like it's like my desire and it's like a desire. It's like I'm like the servant of it. And it's like what? But that's like, I guess that's part of the counterintuitive, like strange, loopy trippiness of the
Okay.
whole thing. Of, like,
Uh-huh.
it's like my desire, but I'm like a slave to it. It's like, it's crazy.
All right. Now, the last one on the list is the item that is referred to is that you are on a long journey. In the sutta, it talks about one who has a camel load of goods. You're the merchant, and you're traveling through the desert, which is hot, dry, and dangerous. And then finally, you either get to a rest stop or to an oasis or even back home. And the first thing that happens is that you relax. An example of that is when you moved into, you're out traveling and you move to a hotel room, you get the room, and the first thing you do when you get into that hotel room is that you lay down on the bed. Ah, relax. We're finally home. We finally can relax. Our traveling is finished. That, in fact, that happens with cowboys who ride into town after they've been out on the hot, dusty trail. The first thing they do when they get off the horse is not take care of the horse. The first thing they do is they go into the saloon and sit
Yeah.
down. All right, take a
Yeah.
load off. Okay, I have finally arrived. So this is the quality of the feeling of the being free from the hindrances is that we're home. We've relaxed. We don't have the burden. We can set down our burdens. In fact, the setting down of the burden is the same thing as getting out of the prison, getting out of the hospital, or getting out of debt. Freedom has the taste everywhere. Just like every sea, no matter which river flows into the ocean, all the ocean tastes the same. It's all salty. Well, freedom from the hindrances is that way too. It doesn't matter which freedom or which hindrance you're fed into. The taste of the freedom from that hindrance is always the same. Freedom. I'm free of it. Yeah. Okay. So that's what we need to start paying attention to is, aha, I see you, and now I'm free from you. Aha, I don't have to think about that. That's the relief that we feel when we recognize that we have just finished that hindrance, that we have arrived home, that we've gotten out of the hospital, that we've just been released from jail, that we've just gotten out of debt. Having that kind of feeling is what we expect to have for the first jhana, is that feeling of relief. All of these things have the quality of the feeling of relief. Coming home after a long journey with all of our goods, what a relief. Coming out of the hospital, what a relief. Coming out of prison,
What a relief. Yeah.
what a relief. So all of those books you're reading, set them down. What a relief. Okay. So anyway, let's go ahead and finish the call. I think that we've gotten somewhere with this. When you begin to understand that these hindrances, getting rid of them, the taste is relief. The taste is feeling of freedom. And that's what we're looking for. Throwing the hindrances out actually create that sense of relief, just like paying a debt off. Yates, being free from debt, or coming home after a long journey, and we feel relief.
Yeah.
So go with that. Go with getting the hindrances out of the mind, and then take the relief.
All right. I don't know if you can hear me, but fantastic. Thank you.
I can hear enough. Okay, Robert, we'll see you later. And
Ciao. All right, fantastic. Thank you. See you
okay,
soon.
okay.